So let's see. Title of the article is How the West and the IMF Debt Trapped Angola. All right, so let's take a look at this, guys. The relationship between Angola and the International Monetary Fund has been complex, with significant criticism regarding the impact of IMF policies on Angola's economic situation, as we've seen with most other countries in Africa and the global South. The critique often centers around the concept of debt trap diplomacy. And if you don't know, you can get the book by John Perkins, I believe. It's called Economic Confessions of an Economic Hitman, where he's already been one of the people that pointed this out a while ago. International financial institutions like the IMF are accused of imposing onerous conditions on loans, which can lead to prolonged economic dependency and hinder development. So, like we've seen before, get you to a point of debt cycle where you're taking out loans that are high interest to pay off the low interest loans, and vice versa. The IMF's role in Angola. So, Angola's engagement with the IMF was marked by a series of economic programs aimed at stabilizing its economy, particularly following the end of the Civil War in 2002. And that's about the time the IMF swoops in always. Is like in 91 when the Soviet Union fell and Ukraine needed some assistance. The IMF swooped in and gave them loans with very stringent conditions. The IMF's involvement has focused on structural adjustment programs intended to promote fiscal discipline and economic reform. Now, that's a funny way to say we're going to limit your sovereignty. So if you take these loans and you can't pay, we're going to force you to make adjustments. And in those cases, it's usually social spending, stuff like that, welfare programs, social security, belt tightening measures. These programs have been criticized very often for their stringent conditions, which some argue prioritize debt repayment over the social and economic development. And they're known to skyrocket poverty in any given country. With the case of Milei in Argentina, who came to power claiming that he was going to, anarcho-capitalist everything, and it's going to be wonderful, the poverty shot up to something like 500%. So, Angola's economy is heavily dependent on oil, which is a big part of the story. It makes it vulnerable to fluctuations in global oil prices, which have been going up and down pretty radically since the beginning of the combustion engine, frankly. And thanks to political developments that happen, the oil prices can plummet overnight. The dependency of oil for them was strikingly highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic, when the collapse in oil prices severely impacted Angola's fiscal revenues and increased its debt burden. Okay. The IMF's response involved loans with conditions that included austerity measures and economic restructurings, what they call a haircut. They come in and tighten your belt and give you a haircut. Restructure your debt, they'll devalue your currency. They come in, what it does is give them extraordinary powers over the sovereignty of a country to make sure it's going to, hey, you got to pay me my money. You had a bad day, fuck you, pay me. Critics argue that such conditions exacerbate poverty and inequality by forcing cuts on essential public services like healthcare and education, which they typically do. The IMF's projections for Angola's debt has been inconsistent. Initially, the IMF anticipated a decline in the public debt to 72% of GDP by the end of 2021. But, however, due to external shocks like the pandemic and oil price volatility, Angola's debt actually reached 127% of GDP by the end of 2020. This means that they were not, 127% of GDP. That's higher than 100%. You're in debt. You're in the red. I'm no big city economist, but it seems to me Angola's industries, debt, and economic situation. So let's just take a look at some of the stats here. Their debt was in decline in 2022. World Economic estimates that Angola's GDP to be about 504 billion, which is 90% larger than official estimates. Wow, there. Angola's real GDP growth forecast for 2024 has been revised up from 1.4 to 3.4. Price of oil is stabilizing. Another horrible trick of globalization is that you have to deindustrialize your country, focus on one key export, and then trade that on the world stage for, monopoly money that the United States prints. Angolan crude oil output is forecast to grow about 3% in 2024, so they're pumping more, they're selling more. Industrial production in Angola decreased by 6.20% in the first quarter of 2023, and Angola's external debt decreased about, what's that, 50,000 USD? Oh my God. From 52 USD million previously. I don't know what that stat's trying to tell me. Apparently, as the price of oil fluctuates, apparently so does the economy of Angola. So, like a lot of countries where there's resources, you'll find the IMF. Where there's delicious oil or minerals, you'll find Western powers, or Eastern powers for that matter, meddling in the region, trying to convince them and their people that just let us in. Let us in with our loans. Let us in with our mining companies and our mining equipment and our mining expertise. And it'll all be just fine. We don't mean you any harm. We just want to split 50-50 down the middle. And when you ask us to teach us how to do what we're doing, we'll kill you, or we'll, sue you or whatever, and claim that it's proprietary information. Hey, get your own. I'm all for technology transfer. I think we should, if you're going to do business in a country and extract their resources, you should let them know exactly how much resources they have. In the case of Senegal, they have gold, I think, or maybe I'm thinking in one of these African countries, there was gold. And the fact is the mining companies from the West knew more about the gold and how much was there and all the data involved than the actual people of the country. So, and that's dangerous. That's a dangerous thing. And they refuse to give it over because that's business and that's proprietary information. So critics argue that the IMF's approach to Angola reflects a broader pattern of debt trap diplomacy, where the institution leverages financial assistance to exert influence over national policies. Now, when you see China do it, they're not trying to bend their policies the same way. They don't come with these stringent strings attached. They want their money back, and I'm sure that they mean it, but they're clearly not the same kind of thing that the United States is pulling here, because the United States has always had the upper hand. Now there's multiple creditors in the world, and so China's coming along, forgiving debt, trying to play it a little bit more cool, a little more diplomatic. And that's a big reason why we hate China too, is because they're cutting in on our gig. This is our action here. The IMF's insistence on austerity measures, despite evidence such policies could worsen economic conditions, has been, to say the least, very contentious. Nobody wants to have their currency devalued. Nobody wants to have their poor people starved. And nobody needs to have forced privatization where you allow Western corporations to come in and take over your mining operations or your ports. The involvement of IMF in Angola has been juxtaposed with alternative financing options such as Chinese loans, which, although more expensive, do not come with the same conditions. Now, this has led some African countries, including Angola, to seek Chinese financing as a way to circumvent restrictive policies imposed by Western financial institutions. So they're looking at the loans and saying, we're getting a better deal from the Chinese. We're going to go with them. And this is happening all over the world. All over the world. And the only thing left that America has on the global stage to protect their hegemony is military power. If you don't do what I say, I'll kick your ass. While China's saying, hey, look, I'll help you. I'm not going to kick your ass. You do your thing. You live there. I live here, whatever. The United States says, I'm going to give you a bad deal and you're going to take it. And if you don't like it, I'll come overthrow your country. So let's get down to the skinny of Angola. What's their history? The meddling that's involved. You know, I know that there was a colonial period. Of course, it was a Portuguese colony from the 16th century until 1975. Western powers largely supported Portugal's colonial rule, either directly or indirectly. When Angola gained independence in 1975, it immediately plunged into a civil war that lasted into 2002. So, huge chunk of time there. The conflict became a proxy war between in the Cold War context between Western and Eastern Bloc countries. So Angola got used as a puppet, as a rag doll to be pulled and pushed between these two superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States. Of course, the Soviet Union and Cuba backed the ruling MPLA, the People's Movement of the Liberation of Angola, and the United States and South Africa supported the UNITA, or the National Union for Total Independence of Angola. UNITA, potato, patata. Which is funny. Both of these groups, this is the problem with conflicts. One says liberation, the other one says independence. They both want independence from each other, but secretly both being funded by foreign devils. The foreign involvement, academics say, significantly prolonged and intensified the conflict, which lasted over 30 years by my stoned math. The U.S. involvement, let's see what they have done. Because look, this is the one kicker, because when you find out the level of involvement in U.S. foreign policy, like regime change, coups, whatever you call it, when we go overseas and we meddle in the affairs of sovereign nations, we do it on every level. We do it with soft power. We do it with hard power. We do it with manipulation and coercion, and we do it just broadly and bluntly. We do it with film as well. The whole film industry is geared around being a propaganda arm of the United States government. After the end of the Cold War, Western involvement in Angola shifted. International pressure, including from Western countries, helped push for peace negotiations in the 1990s. The United Nations, with support from Western nations, attempted to broker peace deals and oversee elections. However, these efforts were unsuccessful in preventing the resumption of the conflict. Now, what are the economic interests of Angola? This is an important thing. Behind the wealth of a country, you'll find exactly what the politics and the conflicts of that country are about. Western oil companies operating in Angola have faced numerous controversies because, look, oil is the main thing in Angola. So it's primarily centered around issues of transparency and corruption and ethical conduct with these particular companies. For instance, you have companies like BP, Chevron, Total. They've been criticized for their lack of financial disclosure. People have said that their payments to the Angolan government and state oil company have fueled corruption and misappropriation of funds. And so in 2002, BP had faced threats of contract termination when it considered publishing details of its payment to the Angolan government, highlighting pressure to remain secret. So they were paying each other off, and then when it came to light, they were like, well, trying to sweep it under the rug the best they could. So BP is working with the Angolan government and extracting oil while enriching, a very minute group, small group of people in Angola. Corruption, typical corruption. The oil industry's role in potentially prolonging Angola's civil war through revenue generation has also been scrutinized. Additionally, the environmental concerns have been raised. They do plenty of offshore drilling operations, stuff like that. So, but yeah, the thing is, think of Halliburton, guys. Remember in the days of Iraq when we went into Iraq, and it was in our best interest to keep Iraq destabilized long enough to make out like bandits on the oil that was there. Now, this is exactly the same. When BP is working within Angola and there's a civil war happening, and they know that they will get less regulations and better pay if the country is in disagreement or in disarray or in complete chaos. This is typical too. You'll see this in countries that have amazing natural resources, is that they can't get their shit together politically. Just so happens there's a new group of rebels every week with guns that have been freshly shipped over from America, who have a mission to overtake the status quo. This next guy is going to get it. Despite Angola's vast oil wealth, the country continues to struggle with high poverty rates and poor social indicators, leading to accusations of Western oil companies being complicit in the uneven distribution of wealth and indirectly supporting a system that fails to benefit the majority of Angolans. So there you go. So recently, Western companies, Western powers, increasingly trying to distance themselves from these past images, even from decades ago. They're still saying stuff like we're promoting democratic reforms and good governance and supporting economic development and diversification efforts, and also addressing the humanitarian issues. Now, you can bet that these are lip service terms, who only maybe 10% of the time actually come through and do something positive to alleviate suffering. Now, China, you guys, has emerged as the major economic partner of Angola. Angola's relationship with China has evolved into a comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership characterized by a robust economic system and infrastructure collaboration. And China, they're not up to no good. I mean, they're probably up to about as no good as everybody else, but their loans, like we talked about, having less trouble involved, like less strings attached, less. They're not going to come and put their hands all over your government and force you into policy change. But they're also helping them build infrastructure. They're not focusing on cash infusion so much as they're looking at trying to build you something. People come to China and they say, we'd like a bridge. And China says, okay, let's plan it all out and make that happen for you. So they're focusing on infrastructure. Since establishing diplomatic ties in 1983, and particularly following the end of Angola's civil war in 2002, China has become Angola's largest trading partner and significant source of investment, particularly in infrastructure projects. These firms have been instrumental in Angola's reconstruction efforts, exemplified by projects like the Quilamba housing development. So that's just one of the things that the Chinese built in that area. Angola is a top recipient of Chinese loans in Africa, with a significant portion directed towards energy projects such as the Kakulo Kabaka hydropower station. So, look, I'm not a big infrastructure guy. I don't know much about it, but I can tell you that allowing finally, after all these years of so-called international development, that these people, the China just comes in and builds them hydropower stations and stuff. I don't care who does it. Bring everybody up to speed in a way that'll be renewable or whatever, and make it so we're not living in the dark ages. Fine. The partnership between China and Angola has been mutually beneficial, with Angola exporting a substantial portion of its oil to China while enjoying zero tariff treatment for most of its exports to China. So they don't charge them tariffs. See, it's a tit for tat situation. They want to take care of each other. The relationship is part of a broader South-South cooperation, emphasizing mutual development and modernization efforts, as seen as Angola's participation in the China Belt and Road Initiative. So, Global South, the Global South shall rise again, folks. So that's my article, and I'm sticking to it.